Good afternoon. In this review video, I'm going to be taking this boring and ordinary looking basement picture, and I'm going to be turning it into a spookier composition using Photoshop. The idea here is that we're going to be learning how we can blend and manipulate images together using Photoshop in a similar manner that you would be doing so for your movie poster. Ultimately, your movie poster will not be landscape format, it'll be vertical format. And hopefully you'll be doing much more than just using one background image. You'll be combining lots and lots of images together in Photoshop to make something that looks really interesting. In this review, I'm just going to go through how I went about setting up this spooky image that we did together in class, just so you can remember all the different tools and see what they can do. So to start, I'm actually going to bring in that television image that I had already created much earlier. Comes in as a smart object. I like smart objects because they allow for greater editability. I'm going to place it in the corner there. And as I pointed out in the class, you'll notice that it has a white background on it because the smart object itself has a white background. To edit a smart object, all I have to do in the layers panel is double click on the smart object icon, and you can see it opens up as a separate file in my Photoshop file. I'm just going to go ahead and turn off all the elements other than the actual TV. I can tell it's going to have a transparent background because it has this checkered pattern. I'm going to hit save, close it, and now that television is in my file. Still the same smart object that's in there. It's just now I've managed to go and turn off the background layer. Not all objects will come in as smart objects, but when you do keep an object as a smart object, it does allow an extra amount of editability. Now I want to add a drop shadow underneath that TV. You can see it's got a bit of a, looks like it should have a shadow underneath it. And rather than just using the layer style drop shadow effect, which will create a great big heavy shadow that won't look realistic, so I'll show you so you can see what I mean. I'll set that to multiply, give it some distance. It doesn't actually look like a proper shadow. I just want a shadow that sits on the floor. And even if I just move my shadow vertically, still doesn't sit quite properly. It makes it look as if the object's floating over top of the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer in between my television and my background. Got a new layer there. And I'm going to call this television shadow. There. I'm going to make a selection using my polygonal lasso tool. I'm just going to make an approximate selection of what I imagine the shadow might look like going from the forelegs. There we are. And in order to close my selection, I just bring the cursor back to where I started. I'm going to fill that in with a darker color. I'm going to not use jet black. I'm trying to see if I can find a really dark color in the carpet. And that way then it should match, make my shadow look a little more realistic. And I'm going to fill that, edit fill. I'm going to fill that space. Now to make it blend in with the underlying layer, I'm going to change my layer blending mode from normal to multiply. And I'm going to lower the opacity on that layer. So you can see now it's giving it a shadow effect, but it's allowing some of the underlying texture to show through, which makes it look more realistic. So I did that by changing the layer blend mode to multiply and lowering the opacity. Now the shadow itself is still pretty harsh. I want to soften it up a bit. So I'm going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to apply my blur. I'm just looking at it over here rather than looking in the preview screen. I'm going to give it about 2.5%. And that gives me a softer edge It helps to create the effect as if there was a shadow under our TV. All right, overall the room itself is feeling quite bright. We want to darken it up. And in class what we did was we added a few adjustment layers. We tried out, let me move this up so you can see it a little better. I think we explored whether or not brightness contrast would be good, playing with levels, playing with exposure. I found that when we use brightness contrast, it would allow us to darken the room, but that light ended up feeling really harsh. So rather than using brightness contrast, I think I ended up going with exposure, just bringing it down, just to make it look a little darker. I don't think I changed the gamma or the offset, sorry. Now the light still does look bright, but not as bad as before. Go a little darker. And actually, if I wanted to darken that up, here's be a chance where I could use that gradient tool. We didn't do this in class, but this is a great way we could darken that top part up. Just select the black color, add a subtle gradient coming in from the top. Oop, actually that's way too dark. Maybe I'll go with a darker gray. I'm just trying this out here. We didn't do this in class. Hides it a little bit. Ideally, what we could also do is we could just use the crop tool to crop off the top of the picture. That's another way we could get rid of hiding that overly bright light. The reason why the light appears really bright is because it is in its nature, it's basically pure white pixels. So it doesn't want to have a lot of shadow to it. And that's why using exposure, brightness, contrast doesn't really affect it too much, because there's not really a whole lot of detail to it. It's just a really bright light area. All right. Now I put in those two adjustment layers under my TV. I'm going to actually drag my TV underneath them. So now my TV sits in the shadow area, making it look a little bit more realistic. In my sample here, I also added a dark shadow in general around the television. And we can do that by adding another layer behind our TV. I'm going to call this one corner shadow. And the way we made this one is we selected our paintbrush tool. I gave it 0% hardness. I'm going to make it pretty big. I'm going to bump it up to about maybe 500 or 600 pixels. Yeah, just seeing as I go. There we go. Yeah, about 600 pixel. Whoop, jumped up really fast there. I'm going to set my color to pretty dark again. My opacity I'm going to keep maybe at about 30 or 40%. I'm just going to click. I'm clicking a number of times to slowly build up that shadow in the corner. And then I'm going to set that layer blending mode to multiply. And if it appears too dark, we can always lower the opacity just to fine tune it. The idea here is I'm trying to make me right behind the TV appear a lot darker, so that the TV itself will, when we have it glowing, will appear much brighter. All right, I want to add in a glow on the floor. Actually, I'm going to make my exposure just a little darker. There we go. I want to add a glow on the floor as if light is being projected off the TV. So I'm going to make a new layer and call it floor glow. And I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool to draw a trapezoid on the floor of where my glow will be projecting. I'm going to fill this with a light yellow. I'm going to use my gradient tool. And once again, like we did with the text effects, I want my gradient set foreground to transparent, just so I have a soft transition from 100% color to 0. And I'm going to click and drag to create that gradient. Deselect, Command D, or select, deselect. Right now my gradient feels a little harsh, so I'm going to make the edges softer by going Filter, Blur. I'm going to use that Gaussian blur again. There. This time I'm going to soften it up even more. 5 or 6%, maybe about 8. And then I want to change the layer blending mode of the floor so that the pattern on the floor shows through as if it's being lit up. So with the floor go selected under the layer blending mode, I'm going to see which one works best. I'll try lighten, screen, overlay, soft light. Actually, soft light's kind of looking neat. I can see the floor glowing there. The idea here is I'm just playing to see what works best. Some of them are going to be way too harsh, some of them are going to be way too vivid. I find soft light is allowing the texture to show through and create a glow. I'm going to duplicate this layer so I can build up that glow and also then make it look like it's diffusing more. So with that layer selected, I'm going to, from the flyout menu, I'm going to use duplicate layer. And you'll notice instantly it does make that floor appear like it's glowing a little more. And then I'm going to transform this so I can actually spread it out a bit to create a bit of more of a diffused effect along the edges. So with that layer selected, I'm going to go Edit, Transform. And I'm going to select Perspective, because what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to transform both sides at the same time. So if I select the anchor point down here, on the opposite side, it'll move out as well. And so by pulling the fuse over a little, you can see, pulling the transform over a little, you can see now it's got that brighter in the middle, and it kind of fades off more as it goes to the edge. All right, we've got ourselves a glowing floor in front of our TV. Now, I want to add a glow on the TV. So I'll zoom in here. I'm going to make a new layer and call this TV Glow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle, the shape of the TV, and then we're going to apply an inner glow and an outer glow to it. So I'm going to start by making my circle. I'm going to use the elliptical marquee selection tool. But it's really hard lining up a circle perfectly with the screen. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use guides to create a guide along the top and the bottom of the screen. And now, if I draw my elliptical marquee selection, it's a lot easier to get it to line up perfectly with the screen. Once I have that lined up, I'm going to fill that with same yellow as using for my glow. So Edit, Fill. Keyboard shortcut is F5. Deselect. I'm going to temporarily hide my guides. View, Show, Guides, turn them off. Now with that screen created, I'm going to add, using a layer style, an outer glow and an to it. A layer style, outer glow. I'm going to select same yellow color. I can do this by clicking on the color here, eyedropper anywhere on the screen, click OK. I'm going to set this to, I'll try screen first. It's going to bump up the size. There we are. Maybe I'll go a little bit lighter in my color. Keep it nice light yellow. Just making it bigger, just to give a glowing effect on the TV. can adjust your opacity and everything as needed be. All right, so I got a glow on the screen. Now I want to add my television program onto the screen. So I'm going to use one of those images. I'm going to use one of those kind of creepy looking images. I'll use this one. I'm going to bring it in. It's going to sit over top my TV glow layer, and I'm just going to transform it down. So I want to have that bear head about the same size as the TV. Double click to place it. And I can either apply a layer mask, or I could also set this as a clipping layer. So it's the exact same size as the TV. So clipping layer is what we did with the frozen text. All right, select create clipping mask, and what that's doing is making it only visible where the TV or the pixels are on the underlying layer. The other way that I could do that would be I could create a layer mask, and I'll make a mask by first selecting the shape of that TV glow, and then going to my bear layer, clicking add layer mask, and it's going to mask everything that's outside of that selection. Both methods work fine. Both methods employ different techniques. What I am going to do is I'm going to change the layer blending mode of that bear. I'm going to see, I think, difference or exclusion. Exclusion makes it look pretty creepy. And then I'm going to give it an inner glow. Oops, wrong button. I'm going to give it an inner glow to help create that glowing effect like it's on TV. So I'm going to select inner glow. There we are. I'll make it a lighter yellow as well. Maybe I'll add an outer glow as well, just to double up the effect. There we go. And if I wanted to fade my image a bit, but not fade my glow, in the layer panel, if you have a layer that has effects applied to it, if you adjust the opacity, it'll adjust the opacity of everything on that layer. But you can adjust the opacity of just the fill. What that means is that your layer effects, your glows, your brightnesses, your bevels and bosses, your drop shadows, they'll stay at 100%, but just the actual picture will lower in opacity. So it's kind of neat that you can do that. Alrighty, we got ourselves a creepy TV program. The last thing we did in class together is we added in a little bit of glow on some of the elements in the room, and we'll quickly do that together. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this bar glow because I'm going to add a glow to that bar. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a glow along the edge as if the TV is hitting, the light from the TV is hitting it. I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool to make a selection. Just going to select that bar. And then I know from past experience, if I try and use the gradient tool, it's going to come in on a weird angle because the pole itself is on a slight angle. So instead, I'm going to paint with the paintbrush. Keyboard shortcut is B. I'm going to drop my paintbrush down really small. You can use the rectangular brackets on your keyboard, or you can use the drop-down menu control panel, or you can right-click. I got a soft edge on it, and then I'm going to draw a straight line all the way from the top to the bottom. Now, if I just click and drag, I might not get a perfectly straight line if I'm not that good at painting. I change my opacity up to 100% so it works better. What you can do with a paintbrush is you can actually draw a straight line with a paintbrush if you click, hold down Shift, move to the new location, and click again. It'll draw a straight line from where you clicked first time to the second time. And I'm going to do that here. I'm going to position my mouse, my brush just on the edge of that selection. Click, hold down Shift, click. It's still actually coming in a little too big. I'm going to decrease my brush size a bit because I don't want a huge glow. Click, hold down Shift, click, release. Try this one more time. It's not really going nicely for me. Click, hold down Shift, click. There we go. Well, it's all right. Now I've got that edge of that bar looking like it's got a glow coming off the TV. And if it's too bright, I can always drop the opacity down. I can even play around with different layer blending modes to get different effects. I'll just keep it at normal for right now. The second spot where I added a glow was on this metal band on the record player table. So I'll add a new layer, record player table. I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool to make a selection again. Just helps a lot. It makes it easier for painting in the lines. And this time I'm going to use my gradient tool, keyboard shortcut G. Just because it allows me to, for a little quicker, to draw that light as it's receding from 100% to less. I didn't draw my corner very nicely there. We'll just pretend that I did. And then the final thing was for the record holder, sorry. A little hutch in the wall. I'm going to draw a rectangular shape everywhere the metal is, just so I can make it look like the light is hitting it once again, like everything else. Now you'll notice I'm drawing right over where the bar is. I didn't do that good a job. I'll do that again. That was terrible. Zoom in. Now I can see it better. I can use my gradient tool. There we go. And now I've got that nice kind of reflection as if the light's reflecting off of it as well. Problem is it's intercepting with where the bar is, and I want to make sure I hide it to make it look like it goes behind the bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool again to make a selection. And the selection is going to allow me to paint on my layer mask. I'm going to make sure my foreground, background colors are black and white. Black conceals, white reveals. The selection just makes it easier to paint in the lines. Deselect, because what I'm doing is I'm basically just trying to hide it to make it look like it goes behind that pole. And there you have a very quick and easy, creepy looking scene created using a combination of images, similar to what you're probably going to do, or maybe not similar, but hopefully you're going to do something interesting with images for your poster. I've used layer blending modes, I've used layer styles, I've used adjustment layers, I've used multiple images, I've edited them, cropped them, masked them as needed be to put together hopefully what would be, I don't know, kind of an interesting poster that might help tell an interesting story. Next, all we could do is bring in some kind of title bar, the Phantom of the TV. I'll move that up to the top. And then just like we did with our frozen text, we could apply different effects to help tell this spooky story of whatever's going on in the basement. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this gives you a good start in terms of thinking about how you can manipulate and edit images together. We can also use a lot of the cloning effects that we used in project number 2. And I have one more video that I'll post with painting in Photoshop. And then our final class before our second last class is going to be going through and putting a whole poster together, start to finish, just so that helps you as well. Hopefully this has helped out and you enjoy it. Thank you.